Hi, everyone. Full disclosure, I have bad public speaking anxiety, but I am really excited to share with you all a little bit about this project. It makes me really happy to see people logging in from a number of different organizations. Today, I'm going to be speaking about the value of public websites and alternative data sources, especially for gathering insights around public programs. Whether you're in federal government or if you're in a state or local government, or even industry where you're working on projects where you need to understand people's sentiment, their concerns, where you need to understand the impact of your projects, there's this really growing opportunity to use these alternative data sources. We'll talk a little bit about some insights from our use case, and then we're also going to have an interactive activity. So just to provide you a little bit of context, this is our most recent use case where we used social listening or public pulse mining. This really came from trying to understand the efforts that we have for our ongoing construction projects. Our portfolio, we have construction projects that are happening all over the country. And government construction projects, they can be very beneficial, but we really wanted to evaluate, are our local engagement efforts actually advancing these potential beneficial outcomes? We wanted to understand things like what engagement tactics appear to be working. We also really want to get insights early on in the project because we don't want to, lay down the cement before we find out later that there's going to be this really huge problem. I know I saw a couple people from Queens here. So imagine if you had a project where you were trying to understand different types of engagement and what types of engagement efforts work with some communities and how that might be different. You could imagine even just within Queens, what matters to folks in Flushing might look a little different compared to Jackson Heights and so forth. So in order to do that, we had an evaluation, and one of our researchers went to the construction sites, to a couple of them, interviewing local leaders. And we found some limitations with that. So we were brought in and we did public pulse mining, which I'll get into a little bit more, but essentially using these outside data sources like meeting transcripts, local news. What we saw with that, we were able to validate some of what the researcher had anecdotally. Public data showed some of the same broad messages, and that seemed to be the same. But something did come out of one of the construction sites, and I really want to highlight this example. This was at one of our sites at the northern border. With these interviews, there's usually only about 7 people at these local leaders that sit at these round tables. Talking to them, they had felt that there was really good partnerships between GSA, there was good back and forth, but the people who were not those key stakeholders felt that it was all very one way. We only surfaced that by looking at the news, by looking at these meeting transcripts. And so we found that a lot of folks were frustrated or a little bit skeptical. They were worried about uncertainty around the project timeline, how that might impact them. We really found that the sentiment and the views of the people, the local leaders who were directly interacting with our federal government officials in the area, those sentiments, those positive sentiments, they weren't the same as the broader community. This is really important for us because our evaluation question was really trying to understand if our local engagement efforts were working. And if we didn't have that, we would have had a very inaccurate understanding of our agency's place in that community. So online data, it's really valuable. It's everything from forums, there's media coverage, recorded in-person meetings or virtual meetings, a lot of local government, there's town halls. All of that can be mined and systematically analyzed. Also, we really think we found in a number of different projects that unsolicited feedback, so when the feedback is initiated by the individuals, has really shown value. We're hearing feedback in people's own words. But we sort of have this problem, or what it may have been a problem in the past. We don't want to have a human have to go through and sort and figure out what's valuable with all of this different data. And so what we did to sort of bridge AI as well as qualitative analysis is we built a lot of open source tools to enable automated high quality insights. So we have this data, YouTube transcripts, Google News, public government RSS feeds. This data, as we talked about before, it is really insightful. But why aren't people doing it? A lot of folks aren't used to working with text data. It's very different from traditional data. We want to be able to turn this data into a tabular data set that we can then do more analysis on. That's really what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to have our exercises on is that piece of using Gen AI to take unstructured data and put it in something tabular. But we also applied our own natural language processing models. Well, we won't go through everything here, but I have a notebook that links to some of those tools. Aspect level sentiment analysis. We created a model on government customer experience data. And this is a really valuable model because it kind of goes one step further. You see this quote here, aspect level sentiment analysis identified, on the National Registry of Historic Places as positive, but needs structural security and technology upgrades as negative. And so it really allows for more targeted understanding of improvements and feedback. We just wanted to highlight that our use case is just one of many. There's a lot of scenarios where this approach can be useful. While we definitely recommend many different pathways for gathering feedback, doing the interviews in person, doing focus group, we also understand, let's imagine there's a situation where a funding cut happens and you can't send researchers out. This way of public pulse mining and social listening, it still provides a way for us to still meet a lot of people where they are, which is online, and a way for us to listen to them as they provide their experiences in their own words. And on the right here, these are just some additional use cases. And this is to get you all thinking because we have an exercise in a little bit. Also, please feel free to ask questions or speak out. I was really hoping that this can be interactive. During this part of the session, we're going to do a brainstorming exercise to learn from you all about what problems you'd like to solve, what data sets or opportunities you see useful for public pulse mining. And then we'll provide some context around prompt engineering for creating that tabular data, and we'll do some examples together. We have some questions here. What's too hard and why? What's hard about tracking execution or impact at your agency? It's like a problem you're facing. Or if you knew what people were thinking, how would that change the direction of your project or program? And where do you see the biggest opportunities with public pulse mining? I did not work on the focus group part. I really worked on the natural language processing and taking all of that data. So unfortunately, I don't have the details for that question. Yeah. As you're thinking, a lot of people mentioned that they're in government. We want to be good stewards of the community. We want to be able to do better. You can really hear more when you're considering these different alternative data sources. We have measuring trust in our institutions. Really, I think what we want for you all to take away is you all are trying to answer questions at a faster speed, and we need to be able to build data sets that can help us answer that in days rather than months. And we really think that this approach is a way for us to be able to do that for later on we can respond quickly and more effectively in innovative ways. Yeah, so we have some really good examples. So trying to gauge community attitudes on major flooding resilience projects around the city, understanding barriers that people may be experiencing when accessing public services. One challenge in measuring impact is getting definitive quantitative feedback at what constitutes a good interaction. Is it direct feedback from customers? Is that feedback biased for digital interactions? Is it some implicit next action taken by the user? And if anybody wants to chime in, please feel free to.
Hey, I'm Ashley. I work with Izzy. I know you're talking right now about your social listening work and example, and I think we should probably just acknowledge that while Izzy's doing this, she is speaking in her own time and capacity today. So just making sure that's clear. That last question about measuring impact of digital interactions, customer experience digital actions for government is actually a separate project that Izzy did. And there was a link earlier on another slide to the GovCX Analyzer. I would really encourage any folks that are interested in how to think about taking unstructured data from interactions your users have on a website, Izzy's put out some really exciting tools to try and make sense and get insight into that customer experience and break those users down into customer types and finding ways to use the unsolicited information they provide, whether it's through their queries, whether it's through their emails to you, whether it's through chat, like other things to try and get a better sense of their experience with your digital solution. I think that's really awesome. In this particular case about social listening, it's sort of like, what information is the public already putting out there that we can, whether it's captured in the news, whether it's captured in local meetings that are happening, like what else is out there that if we could analyze it at scale could really give us insight into the public's sentiment.
Yeah. And so I did kind of come up with some scenarios. Let's say that you're tasked with making a major policy decision, but the only data that you have is some static reports from 6 months ago, a year ago. Would you feel more confident if you had more real-time data, a way to tap into maybe newer publications that are happening? It doesn't just have to be social media. We can really think way more broadly. So this is sort of a whole entire pipeline. We've really adapted this to try to how this might work for a New York City use case. I found some city planning. I also have a consumer complaint, a Reddit post, and there's news articles. You have to have a data ingestion pipeline. Some of these APIs, we focused on free or low-cost APIs, and then we also built a lot of custom web scrapers, all the different projects that we've done around social listening. And the AI NLP pipeline, some of it is parsing and chunking text. We're also using other sorts of techniques. But again, the one that we're going to walk through today is this Gen AI to be able to create tabular data, to summarize, to do information extraction. And really, again, the end goal is to build something tabular that we can then feed into downstream data products. Maybe you want to see topics over time, or you want to have alerts. Before actually doing the prompting exercise, I want to just go over and show you guys how we got here. So effective prompt engineering. And this actually came up in a previous proof of concept in the summer of 2023. Our agency, we were able to use ChatGPT use cases on publicly available data. So prompt engineering, this is a term that basically means using plain language to talk to a ChatGPT or any Gen AI agent and talk to it in a way in which you get what you need. So you get a good result. While the workflow that we have, you do have an API, so forth, before you get to actually making an automated pipeline or applying a prompt to all these data sources, I encourage you all to go back and forth with an interface. Something that I've heard a few times now is that folks have tried an LLM tool and then they've gotten a mediocre result and they've just walked away. We really think that you need to spend more time going back and forth. Just keep on reiterating, asking the LLM to try again, and it will improve. Think of it like the bot is your employee and you're the manager. Great managers provide feedback. So that's how you're going to get better results. One of the reasons why this is set up in Figma is really so that you can see the interaction. You can see it's giving the output and then the going back and forth, like, hey, I need a table, so forth. But really, at the end of all of this, after refining, we did get a master prompt that does allow for extracting into a machine readable table. And so, yeah, we just want to share this here. I'll sort of walk through. This isn't a full prompt, but the prompt that we used for the construction project, this is part of that, at least the tables. Essentially, the whole prompt looks like analyze the following X. So the data source, this transcript or press release, and extract these certain details, and really ensuring that you have a schema. Someone mentioned hallucinations earlier. When you're using it for data extraction, it's really important that you say, if there's none, then state none. So really saying, hey, extract all the details that you find. And then if you don't find it, do none. So this is different headers for the use case. We're trying to understand engagement and participation. We also want to see if there's any mentions about what GSA is doing to address local concerns, engagement best practices. But you can really imagine for your use case, you could swap out these names and then provide another explanation. Another prompt that we found really helpful that's sort of in the back, and this is to ask to create an output from the LLM that provides a strategic rating and also reasoning why. So then you can have 2 extra columns in your tabular data set where you have a rating for importance, and then also you have some reasoning behind that. That's useful if you want to do more qualitative data on top of it. Maybe you're not going to sift through hundreds, but maybe you'll look at a few that were rated very high and do more qualitative analysis. So this is an example. This is kind of hard to see. I don't know if I should pick on someone or if someone wants to volunteer. If not, I'll give maybe some ideas that I saw from this. So I put this in the Community Pulse Miner hub. I can answer some of these questions now before we go through this. So aside from reviewing and refining, did you have any particular evals to determine which parts of the prompts were useful? Yeah, so this was sort of like POC, but we're actually building out a ton of capabilities for really robust evaluation on different prompts. If you use a system prompt or you tweak it a bit, how does it change the output compared to like what you have as a golden standard response? So we are definitely building out capabilities for that. But that was not a part of this project. It was more of heuristic, like we're small, scrappy teams. So going back and forth, 2 people worked on that project. But yeah, those are all great points. And that's what we're building out right now. Yeah. So Nathan, I actually haven't worked with that to connect to specifically structured data sources, but I have heard there seems to be a lot of great work in that space. And then how have these prompts changed as ChatGPT has upgraded their engine? Also, have you tried other AI engines such as Gemini or Claude? Yeah, so for the project that was around press releases, this was really in response to, hey, our agency is saying you could use ChatGPT on public data sources. That was the first one that we got access to. And so we built out that capability with that because that was available. Right now, we have access to more different types of API LLMs, and we have been testing. There are differences. Llama seems to really provide more short responses, less talkative responses. There are some behavioral differences, but I think for this group, that is really what you need. You need at least access to some Gen AI API to be able to do this work. I encourage if anybody wants to start building these types of data sets, work with what you have first. For the construction project, that was from a SageMaker proof of concept. So we just had Llama 3. That was the only model that we had up, and that's what we used. I don't know if anybody on my team is on or anybody else. Ashley, thanks for being here. There's a lot of different sorts of questions. Let's see. So no PII. The reason why no PII for this type of process, we're feeding in that data. This comes from an open source data set, but from the news, the articles that we are feeding into the API, that doesn't have any PII in that. But if I were to give a suggestion on what you should do, there's a lot of really great open source packages out there like Presidio, Star PII that have really good performance rates. If you want to use this approach on internal data or customer experience data, then we definitely recommend that approach. So the data that we had for this, the construction project, we actually used news only, local news, and the transcripts that are already publicly available on YouTube. So there's really no risk. It's not sensitive data, it's not health data. So are you able to share an optimal template for better prompt engineering? Yeah, so all of this, we put it on GitHub. This has worked for us. We've used it in a number of different ways. We think that you can use this starter prompt if you're trying to create structured data out of unstructured data. And so maybe we can go through these 2 consumer complaints, and we can maybe work together to come up with some columns or details that we would want to extract from each complaint. This data set comes from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It has lots of different consumer complaints. I filtered it to New York City, and all of that huge data set, it's 26,000 just within the last year. That's in the GitHub repo. I have a screenshot here of just two of those examples. These are both from Bronx. You can see the consumer complaints. Some of them are pretty small, some of them are pretty big. I was thinking about what I might find interesting if I wanted to analyze this. I might want to extract columns like, hey, what banks were mentioned? Are there mentions of like emotion? So in that first one, this person is saying, I felt helpless. Are there mentions of laws? These are sort of details that you might be interested in extracting. Does anybody else have any details that they think would be kind of fun or interesting to analyze from extracting from consumer complaints? Okay, so maybe seeing if there's a way to see if this person filed a similar complaint. Yeah, you could do like a text similarity from the database. That is a great idea for deeper research studies. I think it would be really cool to see, looking across the different sources, what the gaps are. Absolutely. There's just so much that you could do with this data. And my hope is, honestly, if you all came out of this and was like, okay, my next project, I'm going to try to incorporate some unstructured data or some data from the web, I'd be really happy. I definitely encourage for the tabular data, if your organization doesn't currently have access to it, it really is such a game changer.
Yeah, if I can add on to that, oftentimes when we're thinking about user experience or trying to understand public sentiment, we default to things like surveys, structured surveys, and soliciting and asking for their feedback. I think we've found, and probably others have too, you get a different population of folks that actually take a survey and want to rate things on a 1 through 5 scale. You're just going to get different feedback that way than you are about actually listening to their comments, their complaints, their emails, their conversations. You're going to get a much richer sense of the public sentiment and their engagement on the topic and how they really feel about the service or the experience if you engage in that unstructured text. You're only really listening to a small fraction of your public and your users if you're relying purely on structured survey data. That would be one pitch here. If there is a data set that has a bunch of great free text in it that maybe it just seemed intimidating to tackle, I think Izzy's offering some really great tools and techniques to mine that for information. Whether it's one you've got in-house or it's something that might be available on the internet that you could scrape and bring in. I think that's what's so powerful and game-changing about what she's offering here.
Yeah, and absolutely. So, Michelle, you're in Brooklyn, depending on what languages you're wanting to use, you can have an instruction to either translate or to use it with different languages. For New York City, so many of our public health notices, a lot of things are in different languages. There are some really great models, and there is a lot going on in the NLP research community around different types of colloquialisms, a lot of great work around that, and people are building models for that. There are some Python packages. We did a project where we looked at a website that gets a lot of student users, and there are some keyword lookups for slang, for profanity, and so forth. So I have used those tools. This is a really great. I just wanted to end with this thought of, hey, how could pulse mining be used for an environment like New York City? So here are some example use cases if you want to think about improving 311. Some of you have posted your use cases like around disasters. There's a lot of different ways that you could use this. I have some example data sets to explore as well as some code. You would have to plug in your API to your LLM, but I have like some templates there that you can use. I also wanted to highlight there is a lot of power in this data. We have been seeing more and more trends in recent years in really critical fields, things like traffic reporting. Some of these are older papers. It's just becoming more and more bigger. There is a lot of value from digital conversation data, social media data. With that, I just wanted to say thank you to this New York City open data community. I love New York City open data. week. I also wanted to just shout out to my supervisor. She's a great leader and champion of this work. And then also the social scientists and researchers in the Office of the Evaluation Sciences. They actually brought us into this really awesome evaluation work that they were doing. We worked with them closely. They gave me the keywords of what should I be searching for, all of that. And then lastly, from the Office of the Chief Data Officer, at the time of this evaluation, we were also working with them on a proof of concept with AWS SageMaker to deploy in-house models through an API and then also Gen AI models. And so we had deployed API access to Llama 3 from that. We could not have done this work if we didn't have that up. So thanks, everyone. Please feel free to reach out